One of the questions that we as adopted children wrestle with, not necessarily on a daily basis, but on a pervasive basis, is the question of identity. Who are we? And we learn over time to deal with that question in a variety of ways. Either we stuff it down and pretend it doesn't exist, or we throw ourselves totally into the family into which we've been adopted and declare that is indeed who we are. Or we create fantasies about where we might have come from. Regardless, it is a question that never quite goes away. It is that question that will haunt Jesus throughout the Gospels. Who is this Jesus? And each of the Gospel writers tries to answer that question for us in their own way. Mark invites us into a secret by bringing us to the waters of the Jordan where Jesus is baptized. And we, along with Jesus, hear those words from heaven. This is my Son, the beloved. And so from the very beginning of the gospel, we have a clue as to who this Jesus is. But we alone heard those words. The rest of the world has no clue. And so they continue to ask, who is this Jesus? Where does he get his authority from? It comes on the lips of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious movers and shakers. It comes on the lips of those who witness his miracles, who encounter his teachings. It even comes on the lips of the Roman authorities. Who is this Jesus? Jesus himself raises the question about halfway through Mark's gospel when he invites some speculation. Who do people say that I am? The disciples haul out the latest poll results. Well, 53.7% think that you are John the Baptist come back to life. Another 40% think maybe you're Elijah, and the rest perhaps maybe one of the other prophets. That's all well and good, says Jesus. But who do you say that I am? It is Peter, good old impetuous Peter, who jumps up and down and says, I've got this one. You're the Messiah. You're the deliverer. You're the one we've been waiting for. And Jesus says, right you are. Now don't tell anybody. A little while later, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up a mountain. And there he is joined by Elijah and Moses. And the voice from heaven reiterates what was spoken about this Jesus at his baptism. This is my Son, the beloved. And that we understand fully what this means. God gives us, and Peter and James and John, a bit of an illustration. Moses and Elijah, the great mystery of the Transfiguration. What are they doing here? What's their purpose? What's God trying to say? If you know your Hebrew scriptures, then you will recognize that in those scriptures there are three major divisions of writing. There is the Torah, the law, how to maintain the relationship between God and neighbor. It is embodied by Moses, the giver of the law. The second division is the Ne'evim, the prophets. It speaks to what happens when you don't keep the law. You end up in exile. And the prophet par excellence is Elijah. The third major division in the Hebrew Scriptures is the Ketuvim, the writings, or as some would call the wisdom of God. It is how that law gets lived out in daily life. If the Torah, the law, is the ideal of keeping relationship with God and neighbor, the Ketuvim, the wisdom, is how that law meets the road of daily life and the struggles therein. By default, Jesus represents that wisdom of God. The gospel writer John will make that more clear. But for now, we are presented with Jesus as the one who will show us the way, how to walk the walk of that relationship with God, how to struggle with keeping the law in a compassionate as well as fulfilling way. The reason Jesus shuts Peter up when Peter seems to have the right answer is because Peter really doesn't get it. And it is the struggle for us too, to think that all we need to do is to walk the walk, to keep the law. But at the end of the journey, it is neither Peter, James, or John, nor any of the other disciples, nor any of the faithful that follow Jesus that understand fully who Jesus is. It will be a pagan at the foot of the cross, a Roman soldier who will declare that this is indeed God's Son. For it is only in Jesus' death that we see the fulfillment of the law, where the law will obviously take us in our love for God and neighbor. If we run that out, we must be prepared to die for our neighbor. I'm not naive. I don't believe there are any people out there that are willing to die for me. And I know for certain that I'm not willing to die for most of you. And so we come to stand before God, not on our own merits, not on our own ability to keep the law, but on the very grace of God. God maintains the relationship out of love for us. In Jesus, God made flesh. He fulfills the law on our behalf, that we might stand in that grace at the final judgment. What that means is that we are set free to wrestle with the way, to continue to struggle with acting with justice, loving with kindness, being merciful, and walking humbly before God. That agenda hasn't changed. It hasn't been changed by COVID. It hasn't been changed by the decision of Congress yesterday. It hasn't been changed by all that we deal with in our daily lives. We continue to struggle, knowing that in the end, God will be waiting for us and welcome us home. Today, we struggle. We fight the good fight. we keep the faith, and then God awaits with the crown of righteousness, not only for us, but to all who believe.